Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're hearing me loud and clear. If you're not hearing me, please just type in the chat room, and then I'll try and get the technical people to rectify any issues that we might be having with sound. To our panelists, can you confirm you hear me? Great, thank you so much. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this panel discussion. My name is Taona Mwanyisa. I'll be your moderator for this session. Very exciting session indeed, in a very interesting period in Nigeria as they prepare for the elections. AfioNet, your one-stop organizations on all electoral matters in Africa, decided that they would like to have a look at these elections and probably also just to get a sense of where we are with the preparations of the elections. AfioNet, as you may know, is a coalition of African domestic election observers, which was formed in 2016. And it was formed basically to act as an apex coordinating platform for regional election observation blocks, namely the EHON in East Africa, WION in West Africa, and SADC ECN in Southern Africa. And currently, AfioNet is hosted by ACFMI in Uganda. Hopefully, I get that correctly. We have assembled a very interesting group of panelists, and I will take this opportunity to introduce them and welcome them. The way this session is going to be running is that we will have a set of questions that are going to be directed at our panelists, and we'll afford them the opportunity to respond to issues as they arise. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we will also open up to the audience if there are any questions that you would like to pose to the panelists. But at the same time, also, you have any contributions that you'd like to make. We will, at the end of this session, open up the platform and allow you to ask questions. But at the same time, also, if you have any pressing questions, issues, and you can't hear us properly, please do type in the chat room, and we'll try and see whether we can have the panelists respond to your issues as we go. But bear with us. We might have technical issues with networks, and if we break, I think our colleagues will pick up from there. So to help us go through this topic, I have several panelists from Nigeria, from East as well as from West Africa. Let me take this opportunity to introduce Patrick Okasi, who is a professor of political history and development studies and is currently the chair of the Department of History and International Studies at the Prince Ababuka Adu University in Kogi State in Nigeria. His research interests include executive legislation, relations and the structure of domestic and international politics, gender studies, historiography, development issues, but he's also a resource person and consultant to several international and regional organizations, as well as non-governmental organizations. I would like to welcome you, Professor, to this panel.
Thank you very much.
Second panelist. You're welcome. My second panelist is a colleague who does not need introduction in Nigeria, but I will do the honors and go on to introduce him. Samson is an experienced community organizer and development practitioner with over a decade's experience in constitution building, governance reform, electoral governance, civic engagement, and political organizing. And he serves as the executive director of IAGA Africa and the convener of Not Too Young to Run movement. And for us who have been in industry, I think we are very much familiar with the work that IAGA is doing and the contribution that they've made actually to the continent as well as elections in West Africa. Welcome, Samson, to this panel, and looking forward to discuss and to share experiences with you. Our third panelist is Cynthia Mbamalu. Cynthia is a dedicated human rights and gender rights advocate and a development practitioner She's also a lawyer by profession, and she holds an LLM in comparative and constitutional law from the Central European University. She specializes in human and women rights advocacy, constitution building, elections, and inclusive political leadership. She's also the co-founder of IAGA Africa, where she serves as the director of programs. Welcome, Cynthia. We are excited that you are joining us on this panel, and we are hoping that we'll learn quite a lot in terms of the developments in Nigeria from your wealth of experience as well. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mawusi Dumen, colleague of mine, he's a senior program officer and team leader for elections at the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD, Ghana, an independent and non-partisan research think tank based in Ghana. He has contributed significantly in the center's election programming by providing the needed management, operational coordination, technical support for the successful implementation of projects and activities. And in 2016 to 2020 president and parliamentary elections, Mawusi provided crucial oversight support for the recruitment and training and deployment and supervision of close to 8,000 and 4,000 election observers, respectively. He brings a lot of wealth of experience in election observations in Ghana, but also in the region. Maus, welcome to this panel discussion, and we are excited that you're joining us and sharing your experiences from Ghana as well as the region.
All right, Teona, thank you very much.
So, gentlemen and ladies, this is our list of panelists, and we are excited that we've managed to assemble quite a plethora of people with history in elections. Now, to start us off, I will go into kind of like sub-themes in terms of election preparations. These are very exciting elections in Nigeria, and I think for us who have been following activities as well as preparations for the elections, there's been quite a lot of interest generated out of this election, and there's quite a lot of excitement generated out of the elections. And I think one of the things that we are looking at, and everyone is also appreciating, is the fact that we have a very big constituency of young people that have registered and will be participating in the election. Quite a lot of eyes now. So, Samson, I'm sure maybe Samson is not yet. He's going to be joining us slightly later. I will jump Samson and probably maybe go to Cynthia. Cynthia, maybe you can give us a brief synopsis in terms of how the preparations are going so far, and mostly from the NEC preparations, but also from civil society's perspective in terms of how they are preparing for these elections. Cynthia?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. You were breaking a bit when you asked the questions, but I think you talked about youth population in the elections and the things to watch out in the elections, if I'm correct.
So basically we are, for maybe as a starting point, is maybe a brief synopsis from you in terms of how the preparations are going, and then we can delve into issues relating to participation as well.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. I'll say first, this general elections is a defining moment for Nigeria. It's the 7th general elections post-transition to civilian rule in 1999. But beyond that, is the first elections that will be implemented, or the first national elections to be implemented under the new Electoral Act 2022. And the act introduced a lot of innovation that a lot of people are hopeful would promote transparency in the process. So things as simple as introduction of the use of technology, or legalizing the use of technology to accredit voters, the use of technology to transmit results is one key feature of the law that a lot of citizens are hopeful would improve transparency. Things around reviewing timelines for the elections, or timelines for the release of funds to the Electoral Commission, which by the law was to be released 1 year to the election. And that was done. And I'll talk a bit about why that is very important in the election, especially as we relate to preparations and things around reviewing the Electoral Commission's oversight powers. And when it comes to the results management process, was also an important provision and definition of overvoting. So generally, we have a new law for the elections. And if we think around general preparations, from our observation, Young Africa has long-term observers deployed across the local government area. And part of what we're tracking is the preparations of the Electoral Commission, which in Nigeria's case is called Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. And what we've seen that so far, every geopolitical zone, we have INEC's activities, planning activities ongoing in at least in over 90% of the local government area. The only part of the country that has recorded that currently has about 89% preparation is the southeastern part. And what are the things we're tracking? Things as easy as deployment of non-sensitive materials and some sensitive materials. We can confirm that non-sensitive materials are already deployed to the different electoral commissions, local offices, things as simple as sensitive materials like the bimodal voter accreditation system, the BVAS, which is the technology that will be used to accredit voters and transmit the results, has also been deployed across the states. They were deployed to the state capital for each state. Just last Saturday, there was a mock accreditation in about 436 polling units to test the BVAS, or rather to test its functionality in accrediting voters. And I can provide more information around that. So if you look at preparation generally on a part of the Electoral Commission, activities are ongoing. Voter education is ongoing, although it's still really poor, but we have records of voter education ongoing. If you look at the part of the political part, campaigns are ongoing currently. At least for the major contenders, we can confirm that we have campaigns at the local level. The only challenge we've observed with the campaigns are the quality of the campaigns and the records or reports of hate speech and violence connected to campaigns, like the rallies and state engagement, and even as simple as some of their engagement on media platforms in that respect. So if that's the angle of on the political part. Security-wise, security is key for these elections because the general elections will be conducted and means multidimensional levels of insecurity in every part of the country. And we had a meeting with the chair of the commission last week, and he had provided some updates that they are currently meeting with the heads of the service chiefs and the heads of the security agencies to identify a more effective deployment plan for security, because some communities will require security before the Electoral Commission can access them. And so I can't provide accurate updates on that, because what we have at this moment is information from the Electoral Commission. I know the police had also given a statement committing to deploy personnel across board. But why security is still key is because currently we have reports of attacks on the Electoral Commission offices in some states where the offices are burnt and some materials destroyed. And it also means INEC needs to do a lot to recover. So general overview, preparations are underway for February 25th. INEC is working to ensure deployment. They had informed us that because of the early release of funds, they were able to procure most of the elections materials, and they also had local production of this material, so which is why we are recording deployment to different states. So preparation-wise, a lot of things are ongoing. However, for these elections, there are several factors or indicators that we're tracking that could hamper the successful conduct of the elections or impact negatively on the elections. Things as simple as access to cash with the change in currency in the country, and things as simple as the force scarcity also has implications for logistics management as it relates to movement of materials. And security, like I said, is also really important to look at for these elections and the conduct of political parties. So generally, this is the overview. A lot of work is ongoing by civil society partners, and I can share more insights on that when we continue with the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I will double back on a number of issues that you raised, but let me go to Professor. Professor, what's your take currently in terms of preparation so far? How do you see? Do you think Nigeria is ready? What are the issues that you might want to flag before I go into detail in your context? Okay, we seem to be having a bit of a challenge in terms of connecting to the professor.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
So my question.
Thank you very much. I was thanking you for connecting with Cynthia when the network went off. Cynthia has given a very wonderful synopsis of the entire event. So I'll be talking from the perspective of an academic and a very keen observer. I share entirely the sentiments and what Cynthia has told us as far as this election is concerned with respect to our preparations. For me, I want to place more emphasis on the issue of security. Security is going to be a major challenge. The number of flashpoints ahead of the 2023 general elections, you find that the Independent National Electoral Commission boss has been going around trying to sensitize and talk to security agencies. And the more he does that, the more we see newer challenges emerging. For instance, presently we are talking about having a challenge of the currency swap, which has high tension in the country. People are unable to get the new currency, and this is itself going to be a challenge. And of course, the chairman of the election management body had to visit the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria to solicit support to ensure that it doesn't affect logistics. He also visited the Inspector General of Police, the Special Advisor to the President on security, and of course even the NNC, because we've been having for a long time fuel scarcity. And all of this can hamper the success of the election. And so from what Cynthia has said, you can see that we are close to an election, and for the very first time, we are going to be testing a new electoral act. And so it is work in progress. For most of the things that will happen in this election, we begin to see the outcome when it happens. Because this is we are going to test run the electoral act, and so many issues are likely to arise. So for me, I think that INEC has done a lot of work. They are on course, but there are some unforeseeable challenges that are likely to arise. So I think that we need to be proactive. In the southeastern part of the country, there are skirmishes, burning of offices, like Cynthia said. In the northern part of the country, there have been a number of security issues, kidnapping and banditry. And so we want to see the extent to which our security agencies will be able to respond to these challenges. Because the election is not only a function of the election management body. It requires all hands to be on deck. That collaboration between security agencies and the Independent Electoral Commission and other government agencies, and of course the electorate, will determine whether we are heading for success or whether we are heading for failure. Mind you, 23 years of our democracy.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor. I think I'll double back to you again in terms of follow-up questions. Mausi, as an outsider looking inward, do you think that Nigeria is ready for elections? And maybe just a quick overview on that. And then I'll go into specifics and I'll double back to Cynthia as well as the professor. But from your observation as an outsider, do you see any red flags? What do you see, positives and all that? Do you think Nigeria is ready for elections?
Well, Taylor, thank you very much. And my regards to everyone on the panel, as well as, our listeners. So for me as an outsider, I think, looking at it from the perspective of INEC, Cynthia gave a very nice overview and also followed on issues happening in the country as well. I think that INEC, which is the lead agency mandated to conduct the election, has actually done a lot of work in terms of being able to deliver on its mandate, and they are really on course in terms of doing this. But however, a lot of the variables that will help to make the election successful, part of it is not really within their ambit, and I think Prof also alluded to it. The main issue here has to do with security being one big issue that needs to be dealt with, and I believe that is not just within the sole preserve of INEC, but then within the ambit of the security agencies, and then together with INEC, find ways and means to deal with the widespread insecurity that is not just now confined to just the northeast, but then practically in all the other geopolitical zones within the country. And so that is where the key issue is, because we are looking at a situation where we do not want all the good work that has been done, right from the input that went into the passage of the Electoral Act, and then some of the key issues that have been implemented with the BVAS, the IREP, and the funds that were released to INEC, like in good time, all these things going to waste. Because this insecurity challenge is such that it has the tendency to suppress votes in a lot of places. There's also that tendency for the insecurity to also I'll talk about vote suppression. There's also that tendency for the insecurity to probably hamper a lot of local government areas from even participating in the elections, and so that also has an implication on the threshold for declaring especially for the presidential candidates, and even for the senatorial and other candidates that are vying for. And so those are key issues in there that need to be looked at. And I think there's also this issue about this is mainly from probably INEC side about the threshold that defines who becomes like a president. Okay, so it states that the position states that it should be, I think, the fourth of the leading candidate should have a win, and have a spread in should lead all candidates, and also have a spread in 25% voting at least 2/3 of the 36 states of Nigeria, and then the FCT. And it looks like a lot of interpretations are being given to this particular provision. And so quite recently, as part of a delegation that I joined to Nigeria, we sought to get some clarity around this. And the INEC was like they had actually returned to, they had their lawyers looking into it, and they want to get some interpretation probably from the courts to see what they say about this interpretation, so that it may not be construed as 24 states and the FCT, or even 25 states. Depending on whichever interpretation that are being given to it. So that is also a gray area that needs to be looked at, even as we have barely about 20 or 19 days for the elections to happen. I also want to touch on another side of it that also has to do more with this issue about the no PVC, no vote. And so I think this issue was in court. I've been prior to this conversation, I was tracking to see whether the courts has actually ruled on the particular issue. And I think if that has not been done, I think all these issues are some of the issues that need to be clarified quickly for us to know whether the TVCs, can be used to verify a potential voter, or it's just the PVC. All these things need to come up ahead of time and in good time, so that all the agencies that are involved, including civil society organizations, can go ahead and intensify their public education around some of these issues that are likely to be very thorny, even as we enter into the elections, and especially after the post-election period when results declaration are being done. So all these things need to come out clearly, and I think it has to come out also in good time, just to help everybody within the electoral value chain to be able to remain focused and then know exactly what the ruling says. Okay, so for now, these are some of the thoughts that I have. I'm sure other things will come up as the conversation evolves.
Thank you so much for that. And I think you touched on a number of issues, particularly around the legal framework and how it might impact positively or negatively on the elections, and probably some of the things that we might need to look out for as we go into the election. I'll come back and double back and follow up on those questions. But I'll go to Cynthia. Cynthia, you raised a number of issues around the security situation in the country. And I think we are all worried, and quite a lot of issues have been raised, and I think a number of commentaries have been made relating to the security situation. Have there been any efforts taken to curb the threats that are posed, especially by Boko Haram and other terrorist groups to the elections? And how do you see the security threats? How do you see them impacting the electoral process itself?
Yeah, very important question, and this is a major concern for everyone. Like Prof also mentioned, this is a major worry. There have been some efforts, however, we do believe it's a bit inadequate. So I'll just give a simple instance. With the attacks on this on the of offices or facilities of the Electoral Commission, we had the police deploying support to guard some of the offices. So one of the attacks that had happened in a state in the southeast, Imo State, we had the police respond to that to curb the or reduce the effect of or the damage that was done to the facility. However, the recent one that happened in the local government area in Anambra State, the attack unfortunately was two pronged in the sense that there was an attack on the INEC office there and also at the police station at the same time. So the police was overpowered because they had to respond to the attack happening on their own facility. So it was happening simultaneously. And you can imagine that, of course, there was a lot of damage. The ballot boxes, the voting cubicles, and everything that had been deployed to the facility were all destroyed. Most of them in as high numbers as 200 plus, because those were materials to serve polling units within that local government area. And so you could just imagine that you also. Yes. So I think we're back. I'll just proceed. So that's one hand. So while you have security saying, yes, we're deploying, we also believe it's a bit inadequate because for that singular attack, you could see there was nothing that was done to secure the facility. The other part is the general insecurity that we have in other parts of the country. Every day we're getting reports. Recently, there was an attack in Katsina, which is northwest Nigeria. And in Katsina, what happened was we had the vigilante groups were basically trying to ward off the bandits who attacked the communities and had kidnapped some of the women. And then reports where it took a long over hours before the security forces could respond. And the vigilante groups were overpowered because they are not as armed as the bandits. So you could imagine that for such an incident, for the local government that were affected in that state, it took hours before there was a response to the attack. So imagine if there were no vigilante groups, for instance, operating within that, it would have been worse. And reports still indicate that we had women were kidnapped and facilities were destroyed and citizens were killed. So yes, we do have attempts to provide security or some levels of response, but it's not adequate. And there's a lot more that needs to be done from the level of the federal government, because at the end of it all, security is not really the responsibility of the Electoral Commission. It's the security agencies that have that responsibility. And I think at this point, the president needs to really step up, begin to hold people to account. Budget for security. We cannot have increase in budget and yet not see the effect that we are hoping to achieve. But how does this impact on elections? I think there are three key issues to look at this point. The first is the likelihood that elections will not be conducted in every part of the country. That is the reality. If you think around the fact that some communities have been, citizens were displaced. Some communities that it's difficult to access it because of insecurity, and in some communities, voters would be afraid to turn out to vote. So that's the first part. The likelihood that elections may not hold in every part of the country. The second part is the poor management of information around security, and how that impacts on confidence in the electoral process. And why is this important? Currently, there is no communication from the Electoral Commission on communities where there is likelihood that voting may not happen in some polling units. And why this is important is if we have this information as citizens, we can also provide solutions on how the commission can provide assistance to those voters to vote. Because bear in mind that while we have a framework for voting for internally displaced person, this framework was designed for formal camps, or rather formal camps for internally displaced persons, but we have people displaced who are not in camps and they reside in other locations, and we know there are communities where voting may not take place. So currently we don't have information. The commission hasn't provided that data. They should have that information by now, because they have a joint partnership with the security under the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security. So that lack of information has its impact on the process and could affect confidence, especially if voters begin to see results from localities where we ordinarily do not think elections would hold. The third part for me is how this can impact on the elections is the lack of coordination around election security. And when I talk around coordination with both the security agencies, the Electoral Commission, and the community policing structures that have been set up. So we have communities now where you have vigilantes or some level of community policing being set up. Now, the challenge is on elections day when it comes to security deployment. There's a likelihood that you would have clashes either between this, we've seen this happen before, the army and the police, because when it comes to security, you have the military manning several parts of the country. There are roadblocks set up, and there's a likelihood there will be a clash. Then what also happens on elections day? The different kinds of community policing setup of vigilante groups operating, what will be their role when it comes to the elections? Who coordinates security for those communities where, as it is now, is the community policing structures or the vigilante groups that are taking the lead? So you see these levels of this lack of coordination or clarity on who plays what role or what happens in a scenario of attack on election day. I believe that it would create some level of confusion, and that could also impact on how citizens accept the outcome of the election. So for me, these are three broad issues when you think around the impact of security on the elections, and there's a lot that needs to be done between now and the election day to inspire confidence and also to ensure that we have a clear sense on rules of engagement when it comes to election security in Nigeria. I'll stop here for now, and if there are further questions, I can respond.
No, thank you, Cynthia. I think you raised quite a very interesting point, in particular where you think maybe assuming the violence goes on unabated, the possibility of elections being postponed in those areas. Now, in view of the point made by Maus relating to how a candidate is declared a winner, what impact would this have on the declaration of candidates as winners, given that maybe some areas did not participate in the elections to a large extent? And even that happens, what is the most likely outcome in terms of acceptance of the results to a large extent, given the fact that elections might be postponed in some areas because of violence?
Was this question to me or to Prof? You were breaking a bit.
Oh, okay. So I'm saying I'm just following up on your intervention.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I'm so glad Mausi raised that, because for the first, in a long while, we could almost determine how the elections would go. But this time around, there is no clarity, and there's a likelihood of a runoff for the first time post 1999. Post our transition to civil rule 1999. So what are the major things? I think at this point, we don't have enough voter education going on how elections are won. So a lot of people do not even understand that it's not about majority votes. You need the electoral spread as required in the Constitution, which is 25% of in 2/3 of the states and the Federal Capital Territory. To be declared the winner. So what are the likelihoods of things that would happen, which is why I talked about clarity of better communication. First, there's a likelihood that either of the parties and their supporters may not accept the outcome of the election, especially if they feel that a larger percentage of polling units within their strongholds were not or elections did not hold in those locations because of insecurity. However, one major mitigating factor for that is because within the Electoral Act, within the INEC guideline, INEC has the power to conduct supplementary elections in locations where elections were cancelled or postponed because of insecurity, especially if the number of permanent voters card collected for those polling units cancelled, or where elections were suspended, or where elections were postponed. If the PVCs or permanent voters card collected for those polling units is more than the margin of lead between the two candidates. What this means is the likelihood that some elections will not be concluded on the first day of voting and maybe concluded the subsequent days. We've seen this happen before. In 2021, Anambra State election, because of insecurity in one of the local governments, the election was conducted another day in Ihiala local government to be in particular. And for that, because INEC needed to have better, or rather have the police or the security focus on that local government, and so election was conducted there before they could declare a winner. So there's a likelihood that there may be supplementary elections before, or rather elections to conclude the elections before the final results are declared. If that happens, it could give a sense of fairness, especially for those communities where elections were not held, because what happens is, with a smaller geographical space, security can focus on that location for those elections. So that's one part of it. The second part of the conversation around outcome and accepting the outcome is where there is no clear winner, the constitution is clear, and where there is no clear winner because of lack of either no party meeting the required spread and winning the majority vote, the law provides for a runoff to be conducted within 21 days. And for the runoff to be conducted, the two candidates that will be contesting is a candidate that secured the majority of votes and the candidate that won the highest number of votes in the highest number of states. And in this case, it may not be the first and second candidate. So it may not be the leading candidate, and the runner-up. It could likely be any of the candidates who secures the most number of votes in the highest number of states. So that is what is required for a runoff. The candidate with the highest number of votes and the candidate that secures the most number of votes in the highest number of states. So we don't know that is what is required. So within 21 days, INEC is required to conduct a runoff to determine the winner of the elections for that. So if this happens, what is required is a clear interpretation and clear communication to supporters on why a runoff is needed and how the runoff will be conducted. So that's the other part, and I believe everything is about communication, honestly, and the character or the attitude of the political parties to accept that. The third point for me is whichever way we go, there will be aggrieved parties. And sadly, I'm a bit worried that we may still have likelihood of violence. What matters is the measure or the spread of it. And honestly, is what happens from now to the election that determines the magnitude or the effect of the outcome of the elections as it relates to post-election violence. So things like voter education now, political parties committing to the peace accord that will be signed closer to the election would be key, because at the end of it all, there will be an aggrieved side, there will be a winner and there will be losers. And it's about how the parties respond to that and rely on the courts, or rather channel their grievances through the courts. And maybe to just add, as I just mentioned the courts, I just realized that currently we've had more questions raised at the independence of the judiciary. And we're really hoping that we would have the courts play less role in our elections, because the recent court ruling, and I'll maybe let Prof speak on that, the recent court rulings from the court on some cases have raised a lot of question on the independence of the court and if they can truly guarantee that they are the last hope of the average Nigerian. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, on that. Professor, there has been quite a lot of interest around campaign finance in Nigeria, and I think Nigeria has a history of big spending on elections, particularly from the candidates, but also even the cost of running elections themselves. Now, what is your view on commercialization of the campaign process? I think we have seen quite a lot of money being thrown around. And do you see this impacting the democratic process in Nigeria? But also, do you see it playing a significant role in determining who wins these elections?
Question. I think it has been very, very problematic trying to manage how politicians play around or throw money around in Nigeria. Let me just go back into history and provide some historical perspective that when Nigeria gained political independence, the crisis we had as a nation was basically that of ethno-religious disagreements among the various component units of the country. But by 1979, there was a entirely new dimension introduced. Apart from the ethno-religious dimension to politics, there was the introduction of money in the political process, and which eventually commercialized the political process completely. I still recall that as a small boy growing up in 1979, perhaps 1983, when I experienced probably was about 9 years old, 10 years, when I knew that politicians could really throw money around during the 1983 general elections. But by 1999, it took a different twist. Now, there is a saying that as birds are learning to fly without perching, men are also learning to shoot without missing. Quite often, you find that as Nigeria tries to rejig its electoral laws, the politicians are also introducing new measures of ensuring that they get what they want. And so for me, it has been a problem since 1999. For every election, you see that there is a new dimension and a new twist to it. Let me talk about 2023 ahead of the elections. Cynthia will agree with me that hitherto, there was a spending limit that we had. For the president, it used to be 1 billion naira. For the governorship election, it used to be 200 million naira. The new Electoral Act now allows political parties to spend as much as 5 billion for presidential elections and 1 billion for governorship elections. I think for me, this is massive. It's huge. For those of you that don't understand it in Nigeria, our monetary terms, 5 billion naira is about $11 million. And so when you allow political parties to spend this type of money, you can imagine what is going to happen. So the political parties, for a presidential candidate, you are allowed to spend as much as 5 billion naira. And for the list there is for state legislative houses, where you are allowed to spend as much as $66,000. And so for the political parties arising from this, perhaps, the political parties now increased the amount for the purchase of forms. And so for the ruling All Progressive Congress Party, they sold their presidential forms at the cost of 100 million naira. Now, in dollar terms, that translates to $222,000. So for me as a teacher, it will take me another 30 years to save my money, my salary, before I'll be able to pick a presidential form. So I will need to work for 30, 35 years, save the entire money that I've been able to make, not buy food for my family, not spend on medical care, and then before I'll be qualified to contest an election. That in itself shows that the electoral process has been monetized and commercialized. And it goes down to all the other elections. And so it has created room for politicians to put in money into the process and believing that they are going to recoup their money when they win elections. And that amounts to profiteering. Leadership and governance is not about profit or business making. It's not about profit making. It's about service to community. Now, when you allow so much money to be involved in the process, it denies quality candidates the opportunity of participating in the election. A number of quality candidates are not able to purchase forms because it has become very, very expensive. Now, I will give you an example. It has been difficult to actually track political party expenses during the election. I think that is one area that civil society has been finding it difficult to do so much. But in 2015, attempts were made to track what political parties spent. At that point, political parties for presidential election, the president was allowed to spend as much as 1 billion naira. And then other elections had their own category. Now, civil society was able to track some of the spendings at that point in time. Now, I'll tell you that for just a few items, and I'll mention them, for campaign rallies, billboards, electronic media coverage, and electronic media adverts alone, 4 items, the two major political parties, the APC and the PDP, overspent their limits. And so if for only 4 items they were able to spend more than the required 1.1 billion naira, you can imagine what has been happening. And so now it is 5 billion naira that has been allowed for presidential election. And from the way things are going, you can be rest assured that political parties will spend more than 5 billion naira. And let me also make the point that even before most of the tickets for the political parties were sold, why I say they were sold is that it went to the highest bidder. There has been a number of media reports. There were a number of media reports immediately after the primaries, how money and dollars were used to get presidential tickets, governorship tickets, and other tickets across the country. And so most of those candidates that won elections are obviously going to be out trying to recoup their money as soon as they win election. And so for me, it is one area that we need to pay so much attention to. Having a tracking mechanism, having a device to track expenses of political parties has been a major challenge. And I think there is need for us to work. Political parties behave, particularly not just in Nigeria, but in Africa, especially in terms of their spending expenditure, as if it is a mystery. Most of the books are closed. It is difficult to know what they have spent. The Constitution and the 1999 Constitution as amended and the Electoral Act has a number of provisions that will ensure that political parties don't go beyond their spending limits. But quite often the challenge is how to track these political parties in terms of what they have spent and what they have not spent. So I think it's one area that we need to give so much attention. I know that, for instance, the Constitution says that 6 months after elections, political parties should submit their expenses to the Independent National Electoral Commission. And it has been there. But quite often, I wouldn't know whether Cynthia has heard where INEC came out and told us that this is the amount that political parties spent. One thing we can do, I think, depending on or using the Freedom of Information Bill, is to ask the Independent National Electoral Commission to release a report of what the political parties have spent 6 months after the election, and that will be sometimes in July, August. Those would be my intervention for now.
Professor, very interesting insights into campaign financing. I mean, one of the things maybe in the charts, I'm seeing a comment there, and someone is asking, what is the source of some of these funds and where are they coming from? And the other question is, to what extent can we attribute it to the misuse of state resources?
Thank you very much for that question. Hitherto, we knew that political parties used to organize campaign dinners where they generated some amount of money. But for this election, I've not heard of campaign dinners or fundraising, but the political parties have been spending. And the war chest has been among the major political parties. We have 4 of them, the front line political parties. And if you look at most of those most of the people contesting in those elections, they had occupied government offices at one point or the other. And so we know that they used to organize campaign dinners where monies were raised, but this time I've not heard of any. I wouldn't know whether Cynthia has heard of any. We know that they used to generate from a fundraising dinner through the sale of forms. Like I mentioned initially, the ruling All Progressive Party sold their forms for the position of president at the cost of 100 million naira. If you put together the money they have realized, it is running into billions of naira. So apart from the sale of forms and fundraising dinner, I wouldn't know the other measures political parties in Nigeria used to get money. Perhaps that is why quite often you find that the party in government, is always on top of spending. In 2015, when civil society did some checks on political party spending, you discover that the ruling People's Democratic Party then was on top in terms of expenditure. How they get this money still remains a mystery to some of us, but recently there have been some revelation We are beginning to hear of special purpose vehicles. And in 2015, after the presidential elections, there were a number of allegations that the then security advisor to former President Goodluck Jonathan was used, his office was used to fund the activities of the PDP. But this is still in the realm of allegation, and the matter is still in court. So it will be unfair to begin to pass judgment. But those were the allegations that were here and there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. I mean, Eseru Abel is worried that if the professor is going to need about 30 years to serve so that he can participate in elections, he's worried what becomes of the youth and women who do not have resources. I mean, that was a comment. I'll go to Mausi, and I think trying to look at an area that you have interest in and an area that you have worked on extensively. I think the use of social media and information and disinformation in the elections, particularly going into the Nigerian elections, there has been quite a lot of allegations of misuse of the social media to the advantage of certain candidates. I think BBC recently ran a story of how influencers are being paid to tarnish images of other candidates. Now, how do you see social media being used or misused during this campaign? And to what extent does hate speech and all the propagators of it are actually playing in the process in the Nigerian elections? So to what extent, how do you see social media being used or misused during this campaign? Mouse, you are muted.
So I'm saying that it's just interesting how social media is playing out in terms of how elections, campaigning is being done and how candidates are taking advantage of social media to spread their messages. And the point is that for Nigeria, you have maybe over, I think, about 80 million active internet users. And that means that the ecosystem for information and disinformation spreading is very, very huge and very, very wide. And so find a lot of actors, taking advantage of the digital literacy of people and the strong need for information by voters, citizens in general, to spread this information. It's also interesting to know that although radio might probably be the highest source, I think Afrobarometer finds this also. Radio is probably the highest source of highest information source for a lot of citizens. It's just interesting to know that at a point in time, there's a bit of that spillover effect from what happens offline to what happens online to what happens offline. And so a lot of content that are being generated online that may be targeted at disinforming people, a lot of it actually comes from social media. It's even sometimes picked up by, the traditional media, including radio, TV, and all that. And it's further, spread and becomes more of a misinformation along the disinformation value chain. And so you realize that it's also playing a very key role. And now, in a lot of cases, you find a blurry line between what happens offline and then what happens online. What happens online and then what happens offline. So, just like you mentioned earlier on, it's just interesting to know that quite a lot of this is happening and it's getting on the rise as well. So, politicians, a lot of them, the front-running politicians have become victims of some of these disinformation that are being churned out. And so, a while back, I think Shetima, the running mate for the APC candidate, Bola Tinubu, was linked to Boko Haram. Peter Obi also had his fair share, where he was also linked to the Igbo, who are the separatists in the southeast, that he's taking instructions from and directions from them, and all these things are in an attempt to create dissatisfaction for these candidates and also to reduce the kind of votes that they are likely to make. Atiku also had his fair share. At some point, some misinformation was being spread that he fell ill and seriously fell ill and had been flown out of the country for medical check-up and all that. But I mean, it turned out that all this information was false. So the bottom line is that misinformation is being peddled around a lot, and it's targeting at least to suppress the votes from the strongholds of candidates. I mean, or opposing candidates. It can also be used to target the INEC in itself, in terms of the INEC and its officials, and even with probably the technologies that are being deployed for this election, because a lot of people have some misgivings about the BVAS and its potential, and then the IREF, and so a lot of these things are floating around these issues, and so bots have been engaged to do this kind of the misinformation and disinformation within the elections and all that, contributing to all the likely outcomes that they're likely to see, creating disaffection for candidates, creating disaffection for INEC and its work that it's doing. And you find that influencers are also being engaged, being paid heavily to also, skew narrative that may be, a lot of it may not be true, against certain candidates. And so, I mean, there's a lot that are going on in there that has its own way of, affecting the outcomes of the elections in a way that citizens may not be aware of, or even when they are aware of, they may choose to spread the information regardless. But I think there's that key element of that, digital illiteracy, where people do not get to understand, or take a second look at the kind of messages that they receive on all social media platforms before they pass them on. I also want to look at another dimension as well to this. So the issue about hate speech and intemperate language is also on the rise as well. And I was happy that when Cynthia, in her introductory remark, mentioned that campaigns have become very heated. It's ongoing all over, but the quality of the campaigns are really on the low. And a lot of the main political actors are using hate speech and intemperate language against their opponents, instead of speaking to issues and then their campaign issues about what they actually want to do for the citizens. So it's actually moving the conversations away from what they can do for the citizens and what they can do to make Nigeria progressive, to what their opponents are or are not, which may be immaterial to the conversation. But the obvious thing is that these things that are being done by politicians are likely to anger the basis or the support basis of these candidates, to which these intemperate language are being directed. And if you don't take care, these are some of the things that can spark up clashes at the grassroots level. And so a lot of these things, and a bit of it, are around ethnic dimensions. There has these dimensions also around religious dimensions and all that, which are very, very dangerous, because already there's that entrenched identities around these being formed around these in Nigeria, which we've seen a lot of clashes surrounding this in the past. And so that also creates a potential danger for this particular election. Now, I think that even with the Electoral Act itself, it has aspect of it that actually deals with it. But the key point is that how many politicians have been sanctioned? With the Electoral Act, I think Section 97 of it, how many of them have even been sanctioned based on some of the things that they've said online, inciting violence, and also with the hate speech and intemperate language that they've used against their opponents? And I don't think I've come across any maybe my Nigerian friends may help us out. Anybody that's actually been prosecuted on account of any of these things that are being done, but it has a wider implication for the credibility of the elections and even for the peacefulness of the elections. And so that's one key area to also look at. Okay, so now I also want to touch on something very critical. The BVAS and then the IREV that are being used as part of, that emanated from the Electoral Act, and it's a potential game changer for this election. It's a great one. And then for those of us in civil society and election watchers, we are very much interested in how that will work. But then I don't know, how has INEC engaged? I know this has been piloted with Ekiti and then Osun off-cycle elections. And the key point is that, okay, to what extent are the media, is there any, what do you call it, MOU? Well, I tried searching to see whether the INEC had any MOUs with the media houses on even how to go about using this portal and anything that will likely disturb the peace. I've not come across anything like that. But I'm raising this issue because when I compare what happened in Nigeria, in Kenya, they were also operating a similar system where results from the polling station or polling units level were being uploaded onto the central servers of the IEBC in Kenya. And this is the same thing that INEC would be doing. And in Kenya, what happened was that at one point in time, all the media houses were very enthused about, the information that was coming out from the portal, and they were sharing the information and then collating it on their own. But it looks like they underestimated the extent to which the workload was in how this work was being done. Or it could also be that at some point in time, I just thought that if you look at maybe 3 different channels, you realize that you were finding one candidate leading. It was Ruto at one point in time leading with a particular TV station, while Raila was also leading with a particular TV station. And so I got confused at some point in time when I was in Kenya as to who was winning. And the whole point is that these media houses have affiliation with these candidates, and so they will pick and choose which of the data they want to project. And so they'll probably load a lot more of data coming from the strongholds of their candidates, and so it would look like when you are watching their TV, you will look like, okay, their candidate is probably leaving. And so that created a lot of confusion in Kenya. This is a learning or an opportunity for us to avoid it. And so at some point in time, they had to stop. I think a lot of stakeholder media regulation agencies came in to speak to these media houses, and they had to stop even broadcasting the results that were coming from the IEBC's portal. And so this is also an learning opportunity, I believe, for Nigeria to also look at how that space could also be regulated in such a way that politicians, we know a lot of them own these media houses, and so they want to do things in their own favor so that it does not create an incentive for some level of violence to spark up in the streets. That is something that we need to look out for. But thankfully, I know Yaga Africa and then Channels TV are having a collaboration to actually do a proper analysis with the information that is coming out from the IREF. And so that, for me, is going to be one of the things that maybe watchers, it would help to probably moderate some of the excesses that, if not regulated now before we go into the elections, can create some problems. So I think it's one key issue that I want to highlight here for civil society organizations, Cynthia, and then other people to be able to raise up this issue even as we are going into the election. That there needs to be some form of regulations around how the parties are reporting this. And I also think that, just to conclude, I also think that once we are talking about the issue of misinformation and then how that is being applied and all that, I think INEC should really be on its toes in terms of working very hard to get information out there in real time and trying to and not being very proactive, not giving room to people that are out there to disinform. And I think it will also be good for INEC to look at, having some sort of collaboration with a lot of fact-checking organizations that are in the space to work around to debunk information that is deliberately put out there to, distort the information ecosystem for consumers. And so that is one key issue that I want to highlight in there. And then, yeah.
No, thank you so much, Maus. Quite an interesting. I think this is an area that has been drawing quite a lot of attention in elections, particularly in emerging democracies in Africa. But not only so, but I mean, we saw the use of social media playing out in the American elections with accusations of Russian interference and all. Cynthia, Maus raised quite a very interesting issue here around mobilization, voter mobilization, and gender in elections to some extent. We have noted that from previous elections in 2019, I think the voter turnout was recorded at around 34-point-something%. And do you see this percentage improving in light of the current security threats, particularly within the demography of women and their participation in these elections?
Yeah, very tough question, because all I can say is I'm hopeful. Why? Nigeria, for some reason, we've recorded really low turnouts. You were right, last presidential elections in 2019 we had about 35.6% turnout. And that was an election with about 84 million registered voters. For these elections, we have registered voters figure at 93-point-something million. Voting will be happening in over 176,000 polling units across the country. So the idea was, if you create more polling, because we additional 50-something thousand polling units were created post the last elections, and the idea was, if you create more polling units, there will be better access to voters, or polling units will be brought closer to the people. And during the registration period, there's a lot of interest amongst young people, women also. So for the new registration, we had high registration for youth and for women. And post the consolidation of the voter register, INEC's data, as it is currently, puts women registration at 48%. So we have women voters or female voters at 48% of the 93-point-something million voters in Nigeria. And youth registration was at 39.6%, which is approximately 40% registration. So number-wise, it's showing that if 48% is a huge amount, that's a significant figure of voters. However, as it is currently, there are several factors that enable participation in elections and support turnout. One of that is security, and with the recent security threat that we have, we do worry that it could affect voter turnout. The other part is the larger conversation around turnout in Nigeria, for some reason, is beyond just security and all. It also borders on the confidence in the electoral process, and on the other part, trust in the government or trust in the governance system. And we did a voter turnout study post the 2019 elections. An interesting finding was, for voters a lot of voters who did not participate, the main reason for not participating was that they had lost faith in the government. They did not believe that government was representing their interest, or government was to serve the interest of the people, but rather it was seen as a system or a process to enrich a select few, which was why some of them did not vote, because they were like, we vote and so what? It never amounts to better standard of living. And that for us is a bigger problem, because as we go towards the elections, we have factors that could affect participation beyond just insecurity. And Prof and I had hinted on that, as simple as the hardship caused by the scarcity of the naira. It's a country where at this moment, the government passed a policy to change the currency, and there was a deadline on when Nigerians could use the old notes. But this was so immediate and spontaneous. And what we have now is scarcity of the currency. That to even you have Nigerians who are paying monies to get to just withdraw their money. So some as simple as to withdraw 10,000 naira. Some people are charged as high as 2,000 naira. So you can imagine that there is some level of cost to even with it. So you're not like an exchange rate, like when you like you're going to seek for foreign currency. But it's not just about the cost and even on how much it costs to get your currency. The fact that it is scarce. So Nigerians are sleeping at ATMs, waiting to receive monies. A lot of people, the petty traders and those in the informal sector who basically rely on cash transactions. Yes, there's a lot of challenges and sufferings to even access the card. As I'm speaking, I'm also looking for the naira. So for people who even have monies in their accounts, you can't even use it because you can't find the new currencies. So you can imagine that this is happening closer to the elections. And one of the things that we're seeing from this, a lot of people are just angry and they just believe that governance is never really about, or rather policies from government is not people-centered. And so why participate when you can't even get quality? Same also the first cast. So we think some of this hardship could also affect turnout. So in addition to insecurity. And I think for me, the other part that where we worry is when people begin to lose faith in the process. I talked about the role of the court. There was a judgment from the Electoral Tribunal on a recently concluded governorship elections last year in Osun. Osun State is in the southwest western parts of Nigeria. And basically, although not everyone most people did not read the judgment, but what the court for some reason has succeeded in doing was to raise some doubts around the BVAS, which is an important technology in the elections. Although the judgment, we know that the BVAS functions, but the way the court gave its ruling, it basically just cast some level of doubt on that technology. And for these elections, a lot of voters had indicated interest to vote because of technology, because now they believe that with the BVAS, it will truly be one person, one vote. And with electronic transmission, that the result, that their votes would actually count. So we're worried that with certain attempts to undermine the credibilities of this process, undermine the powers or the undermine the technology, it could also create some levels of doubt. And from media reports, lots of people started to question, should I vote? Will my vote really count? Because the courts could come and give a separate ruling. So if you put all of these factors, my brother, I would say that we do worry on achieving high turnout. For women voters, there's a lot for them to consider. Security is key that could affect women voting. However, women candidacy is really poor. It's barely 10% women candidates. That also is also affecting the morale amongst the women folk. So while we have a reasonable number of registered voters that are women, a high number of youth voters, and even a high number of voter registration, there are several factors that affect turnout. But our appeal as civil societies to voters is basically, especially for women and youth, you actually have the power to influence the outcome of the elections if you all show up in your numbers. So basically, we're asking Nigerians, please come out and vote. Kenya had about 60% turnout, and they called that low turnout. We're even hoping that Nigeria gets 50%, because that for us would be not just a miracle, it would be major progress for our democracy, and we would celebrate a 50 to 60% turnout. But fingers crossed, a lot of things could happen before the elections. At this moment, it's really worrisome, but we're hoping that things will turn around and citizens will be angry enough by this hardship to turn out and vote.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Professor Henry Muguzi wants to know whether there's a possibility that dirty money from oil barons, corruption, and religious fundamentalists have found that money has found its way into financing election campaigns. Could that be the source of the finance that you were referring to?
I actually didn't, thank you very much for that question. I didn't go into looking at the possibility of barons contributing money to elections. But there is this client-patron relationship in politics. And when you monetize the electoral and political process so much, and to the extent that for you to be able to participate, you have to put in so much money. And quite often when you don't have that money, what it means is that you you look for a patron, you look for a godfather. That godfather could be any kind of person, a businessman who has so much money to throw around, and he sponsors your candidatureship, and he expects to make a return or get a return when you finally get into office. They could be barons, they could be fundamentalists, and so on and so forth. But the bottom line is that, like I said initially, when we commercialize the electoral process, we deny very good candidates from running or contesting elections. Cynthia made the point that we have only 10% women contesting these elections. Studies have shown for a very long time that women are unable to participate in politics because quite often they lack the finances to do so. And so when you continue to raise the bar financially, you continue to disempower women from participating in elections. And so if hitherto funds were even sold at a much more cheaper rate and they couldn't participate, now that you have jacked it up, it is not possible for a lot of women and of course the youths to run. We recall the wonderful work that Yaga did to ensure that the Not Too Young to Run bill passed and was signed by Mr. President. But beyond signing laws, there is also need to ensure that people are able to activate the process and participate. Now, having passed that wonderful piece of legislation, the youths do not have the money to be able to contest election. And when it happens like that, the next thing you do is to look for a patron that will sponsor your elections. And so there is a possibility that oil barons, Islamic religious fundamentalists, Christian and Muslim fundamentalists are funding people. That is still in the realm of conjecture. But the bottom line is that once you allow the electoral process, the political environment to be so monetized, it creates room and it gives opportunity for people to do whatever they want to do at that point in time. I am worried. A number of reasons, Cynthia has given a number of reasons that, and I just want to lend my voice to that, could hamper turnout during the elections. She made the point, and she has talked about it consistently, that the issue of security. But I also want to emphasize on the issue of confidence in leadership. A number of persons are beginning to lose confidence in our leaders. Quite often they begin to ask you the question, why should I go out and vote? I did a quick check in one of the classes I taught, and I asked my students how many of them were interested in going to vote. Out of a class of 120, I saw only 10 students raised up their hands. And for me, I said, wow, this is strange, because I thought the enthusiasm was going to be very high this time. It's high this time. But I noticed that a number of them are still reluctant. Why are they reluctant? They are reluctant because the political process, our democracy, is not empowering the youths and, of course, the entire citizens. And so that in itself is a problem. While this program was going on, I just read online, a letter has been released by the National Universities Commission directing all university vice chancellors to close universities on the 22nd of February to ensure that the youths are able to go back home and participate in the election. I hope when they go back home, they will not just go and sit down in their rooms and watch television or play football on the streets. They will take that opportunity of disclosure to participate in the election. Studies have shown that if universities were not closed, about 3.5 million students would have been denied the opportunity to vote in this election. And 3.5 million votes could be very, very massive. They could just swing an election either way. In 2019 or so, I think 2015, the ruling president won with a margin of 3 million votes. So if 3.5 million students will stay at home, you can imagine the effect it could have on our election. So I'm glad that the National Universities Commission, the umbrella organization of all universities in Nigeria, has directed that universities should close on the 22nd to allow our youths participate in these elections. My plea will be that as they go home on the 22nd, they should be ready and armed with their PVCs to vote in that elections. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor. James Lahai, Professor wants to hear from you if there is any consideration for a campaign maybe dubbed Bring Back Elections to Nigerians to reverse the advantage enjoying by those with money. Is that something that we can look at, something that we can consider?
Come again, I didn't get you very clearly.
So James Lahai in the chat is asking, is there any consideration for a campaign called or dubbed Bring Back Elections to Nigeria to reverse the advantage enjoyed by those with money?
Well, we've talked about. I've made the point. I've looked at some of the extant provisions in our laws, especially as it has to do with ensuring that we limit election spending. The problem has always been that of enforcement, whether we are going to be able to enforce these rules to ensure that politicians allow us to do the needful. When I was giving my preliminary, or rather my opening remarks, I talked about the challenge from various dimensions. I looked at pre-election issues and how it has been frustrating. And then the election proper on the day of elections, how politicians are able to manipulate a number of citizens and the electorate to ensure that, and how do they do this? By giving money to people. The issue of Oshun and Ekiti will come to mind. One of the elections, some of the elections we had very recently, and then even after the post-election issue, after the election itself, you still find the politicians. This time they move to the courts. At this point, the people who are majorly affected or try to influence is the judiciary. So at all levels of our electoral process, there is always a challenge in terms of the commercialization of the process. How we are going to quell this, put this to a check this completely, has remained a challenge. I'm only hoping that security agencies will be more proactive this time. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission and the police will be more proactive in ensuring that we bring back our elections and we're able to elect people that will govern us in line with the Electoral Act and the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. And thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I will take a couple of questions from the audience, and then I will ask our panelists to give a final word of maybe encouragement, a final word of optimism as we go into the election. For our members of audience, if you have a question, please drop it in the chat, and I'll try and pick it up and refer it to the panelists that you are directing the question to. I think I have a few of them that I have in the chat. I think there's one question, and any one of you can pick it up. How about the meaningful inclusion of IDPs in the process, that is in election? How is the EMB and CSOs prepared to bring the voices of the IDPs into the process? Anyone can pick up that question that came from, I think, Mesudu G. Reta.
Okay, to respond to the question, thanks for the question. Currently, the Electoral Commission developed a framework for IDP voting, so a framework for voting for internally displaced person. But I think I mentioned this earlier. What the thing about the framework focuses a lot more around formal camps, so where you have formal settlement of IDP. So in camps. However, what several reports have shown is that in Nigeria, not every IDP is in a camp. And in some states, they've been dismantling the camps and asking people to return back, which is where there is a major challenge. So there will be a challenge. We really foresee this for voting for both interstate and intrastate internally displaced persons, especially those who are not in formal camps. because as it is now, INEC has already said that for communities that are displaced, the polling units would be tracked to the camps where the voters from those polling units were relocated to. So they will be voting in those voting camps. We'll call them voting camps or super camps. That's the plan according to the framework. However, there is still no details on those who are not in the camps, how they will vote, if there will be requirements for or rather permission for them to move around, because on elections day there is restriction of movement. There are individuals who do not stay in camps but can go to the camps. So if there will be concession for those voters to move to those camps where their polling units have been moved to and relocated to. But all of this around communication and better information from the Electoral Commission. For CSOs, what we're doing currently is making this demand on INEC for these voters who are not in camps, because that is where we think there'll be major challenge. So we're just calling on the Electoral Commission to provide clarity on what would be their fate in these elections. I hope that was clear enough. Thank you.
Any of our panelists would like to pick up on that? No? Okay, I think the question that I also have, and I think it was sent directly to me, Cynthia, is how prepared are you to conduct a parallel voter tabulation for this election?
This must be a PVT partner. Wow, we are working on it. Not as prepared as we want to. However, a lot of work is going on. So as simple as recruiting observers, for the PVT to be successful, we need to recruit observers from sampled polling units. And I would say that this time around, it took us longer time to recruit our observers. We're almost concluding that process, but we have reasonably over 98% of observers actually currently recruited. But it just shows that even for observer groups, as the security also has impact, because for some communities where our sample polling units fell within, because we don't control the sample, statistics takes us to where we would go. For those communities, we also had to devise new means on getting people who can observe in those sampled polling units. But by and large, with the numbers we've recruited, we are currently training our trainers this week. Next week, we'll be conducting training, over 175 trainings across the country. We're doing a lot of work also to get people ready to observe. So we're working on it, and by the week to the elections, we'll have better update. But one thing is certain, we would be deploying the PVT for these elections.
Thank you so much. Maus, I think this one also came straight to me, and I think it is also predetermined on the basis that you seem to have quite a lot of interest around the BVAS as well as the IREVs for the election. The question is, how is the IREVs going to be used to enhance transparency of results transmission? And do you have confidence in them, considering that Nigeria has had issues with results in past elections?
I think this one was directed to you, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think, well, I do have a high level of confidence in what the BVAS can do. First of all, because it's a step forward, a major step forward in terms of how voter registration is being done. And, on election day itself, because you need to be accredited with the BVAS before being allowed to vote, that in itself can help to stamp out the issue of, first of all, multiple registrations, and then, multiple voting on election day. And in addition to that, it's not just, the BVAS is not, it doesn't just leave it there. What is even more interesting about the BVAS is that it has additional components that allows the polling station results, the forms, the declared polling unit results to be actually scanned and sent online simultaneously to the servers of INEC. And I think it probably even goes to the local government level, the ward level, and the local government level simultaneously. And so that is a game changer, because now the information and the polling station results, which sometimes are often become the bone of contention after election, is of one, as every single voter in Nigeria or every single person who is interested in elections and has access to the internet can be able to go and then view the results at his polling station online by registering on the IREF and then viewing the polling station results for his polling station. And so if you were there and then the results were counted and then collated, or I think Nigeria used tabulation also, was tabulated and it was pasted on a conspicuous place at the polling station, you could probably cross-check afterwards to see whether that particular result that was pasted was actually there. And so that in itself provides some level of checks that ordinary citizens can become part of the process to safeguard the integrity of the elections. In addition to that, the BVAS and then the IREF, I mean, the whole process around the coalition process leaves a trail of, evidence in terms of who had access to the system and all those big other issues that the back end issues and all that. So that even creates an opportunity for an auditing to be done in case somebody is aggrieved by the process and then would want to challenge the results that are coming out from after the election. And so that in itself creates, an easy form of, an auditing to be done to help to be able to uncover any wrongdoing that is likely to occur. And so that in itself is also another key thing that is very helpful. And so that can even help, adjudication processes to be done very quickly. And so that is a good one that I believe Nigerians have taken it a notch higher, and then they are trying to do this. Really, for me, the other interesting part is that Yaga Africa is not just leaving the information there, because they are also interested in, doing some analysis with and I think maybe Cynthia may probably speak to that, doing analysis by downloading all the polling station unit results that have been pasted on the IREF, conducting their own analysis around it, and then, feeding it through Channels TV. And so that in itself also help to, block some of the channels around misinformation that party owned or maybe bigwigs that are affiliated to any of the political parties or candidates would want to use their channels to misinform or mislead the public on who is winning. And so this is creating a lot of, buzz around transparency around the processes. And I mean, if all these things are, carefully adhered to and then implemented as it is, it would create the opportunity for, the elections to become, it will inject a bit more of, credibility into the electoral process. So I think that is the reason why I'm excited about it. I'm more confident about it. And for me, I don't know how this works, because we also want to put pressure. We're putting pressure on our government or our electoral commission to move towards this direction. And I think Kenya doing it, Nigeria also doing it. The learnings out of it is paving the way for us to put more pressure in country here, for them to also toe the same line, for us to also increase the credibility of our electoral processes. So me, those are the good things that I see in there. And I think a lot more people are probably trying to work around it to discredit the kind of improvement that is coming in the elections of Nigeria. And so I think all of us, as civil society organizations and democracy lovers and watchers need to also work hard to debunk and then counter some of these claims that are coming in. And I think for me, one other thing I want to highlight is that I think Yaga Africa would also be interested in comparing the PBT results with the analysis that are being done with the results from the IREF. And so it's something interesting to look out for and to watch out for. So at least we have some, double layered measures to also, check for the integrity of the electoral, the results that are coming, that will churned out by INEC during the course of the election. So these are the good things that I see there.
Thank you so much. I think we are almost winding up, but I'll take last two questions. I think the last one is from Daisy Ramwenya, who wants to know what is contributing to the decline in participation of women, especially those contesting the positions of governor. And I think that might be directed to our sister or the professor. But also the last question that I would like to take is that from Abel Esaru, who would like to ask the professor that he hinted about prevailing voter apathy and what is causing this and what effects are being put to ensure, efforts being put to ensure more voters turn out to vote. So those are the last two questions that I have. Cynthia, you might want to take the first one and Professor the second one.
Yeah, thank you. That's an important question. Several factors. The first is general persisting patriarchy in the system, which has made it difficult for women to be recognized as co-partners in development or recognized as leaders in the system. But beyond that, I would say the political party system. When Prof talked about high cost, honestly, major people that suffer from these women, young people, yes, but women, a lot of women can't afford this cost of nomination. And for some parties, they do give concessions. Some people say free tickets or concession. But what we've seen is wherever there's a concession, it's just like the devil's gift. It's a gift given with the right hand and taking with the left. So we had instances where women at the point of primaries were asked to step down. And the thing is, the parties look at it like, oh, you didn't pay for the nomination. This candidate, this man paid a huge sum of money for that. So you should step down. There were instances where people were even crying because they were forced to step down. So the one of the other issue beyond the patriarchy is the cost of politics in Nigeria, from the cost of nomination to campaign itself. The other for me is also the question about the lack of legal framework. For countries that were able to achieve some increase in women participation, they needed to amend their constitution or pass a legislation that either supports affirmative action or any form of quota system. We don't have that in Nigeria. So as it is now, there is no legal mandate to compel parties to ensure inclusion. What we have is just hoping that the parties from their goodwill will create those spaces for inclusion. But we know that without the law, honestly, there is no incentive for parties to field women candidates, especially for executive positions. So president, governor, most of the candidates we have are running for legislative offices. The other part is also the issues around religion. It's still a major factor here affecting women participation. But even hate speech, I'll give you a simple example. We have a woman contesting for governor in Adamawa, is northeast Nigeria. And just our recent pre-election observation reports from the state, there's consistent hate speech against her. We have imams who are preaching at local government level, asking people not to vote for her because a woman in Islam is not supposed to be a governor to lead, because what it means is that she should be leading the state. And this is going on. There are people even, raising a lot of questioning that, oh, what happens if she's pregnant? Who would lead? What will her, several messaging now. And she's also fighting for her candidacy in court because her party, within the party, they challenged her emergence from a party primaries because they didn't expect she would win the primaries. So you can see that even for the few women that emerge, the campaigns, there's a lot of hate speech targeted at them, and they have to fight through different levels of violence to emerge. So, which is one of the things I would term it around the hostility of the political space to women candidacy. And honestly, this is affecting women emergence. Are there some positive examples? Yes, but as it is now, it is easier for women to win legislative elections. We're yet to see the parties give space for women to emerge in executive offices like governors and even that of the president. And to achieve this, honestly, we do need a legislation to back this up. If not, we'll still struggle with the few or low number of women in politics in Nigeria.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Professor?
Thank you very much. I think Cynthia has been able to provide a very good explanation as to why we have low participation of women in politics. Beyond patriarchy, I think some men in Nigeria still feel that it is a men's world. And so quite often during elections or even before the primaries, they seem to dominate everything. I'll give you an example. If you look at the main political parties, they are all dominated. The executives of these parties are all dominated by men. What they do is to create a position for women, women leaders. There's a position they call a woman leader. That position is given to women. I've always asked, why are you not creating a position for men, position of men leader? Why create a position for women leader, a woman leader? if you have a woman leader, it is only proper that you should also, if you have, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. If you have the position of a woman leader, it is only proper that you should also have a position of a man leader. Now, that position is created just to find a way to appease the women and say, since we have taken everything, take this one and just relax. Unfortunately, for me, women don't seem to be doing enough. The extent to which they go about the politics has not been very strong enough. They have the population in terms of people that have registered to vote. You will find that the number of men and women is almost at par. And so if you have that numerical strength, you should be able to put it to use. That is not to say that men have not done everything humanly possible to frustrate women participation in politics. Patriarchy is key. There is stereotype. Up till now, people feel that politics is a men thing. Quite often, you find men fixing political meetings late in the night, and this denies women the opportunity to participate quite often. And I think women will need to break that jinx. Power is something that is not given up to people upon demand. Power is something that you struggle for. I heard Cynthia talk about affirmative action. Yes, I agree with affirmative action. But even if you have that affirmative action and women are not willing to go there and take it, it will still not work. It was Kwame Nkrumah, the late Ghanaian president, that once said that power is not a commodity that is given to somebody upon demand. It is a struggle for sacrifice. And so women will need to come out very strongly and show that they really want to get this power. Quite often during elections, primary elections that will produce candidates, you see women trying to run for those for elections. But quite often when the men come and dominate and take over everything, because even the process that will always throw up candidates for these elective positions are always not free and fair. Quite often, somebody is asking or somebody would want to know why women are not running for governorship. Quite often, the governors will, as they are leaving office, like presently, they have ordained their personal assistant. Quite often, they are meant to take over. So what we see as primaries, quite often, they are just a charade. I talk about the role that money plays during the process of selecting candidates for political parties. And quite often women don't are very far away from coming close to that. So women will need to be more active and more proactive. And sometimes you also need to show that you are angry. Our women need to be angry at some point and show that, no, this is unacceptable to them. Or else, this commodity will not be given to them upon demand. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been very, very, very exciting and enriching discussion. I will take just maybe 1 minute parting shot from you, your hopes, your aspirations, and your message to the Nigerian voters, starting with Maus.
Okay. So for me, Nigeria.
You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Okay, so the Nigerian election means a lot, not just to Nigerians, but then to, all of us in West Africa and then Africa as a whole. You have the largest, Nigeria has the largest economy, it's the most populous country, and so you need to get it right. There are quite a number of elections that are lined up in West Africa. Sierra Leone in June, Liberia in October. And so Nigeria needs to get it right because there's a lot of instability happening within the West African sub-region. And so we want Nigeria to come out of these elections peaceful, more peacefully, have a credible elections that will not blow out of proportion for the spillover effects to catch us all within West Africa. Well, there's a saying that if Nigeria sneezes, the whole of West Africa catches a cold. And so we don't want to catch that cold, but we want to see you set a good example that other countries within the West African sub-region can follow. And so I'm rooting for Nigeria, and we, just like many other people, want Nigeria to get it right in terms of how they're going about the election. So I believe some of the conversations that we've had here provide some useful pointers, even around some of the advocacy that we, society, can do in the lead up to election. So, yeah, all the best for Nigeria. We are solidly behind you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mausi. Professor, your parting shots?
Like Mausa said, Nigeria is the largest democracy in Africa. I'm glad that since 1999, we've been able to sustain this democracy. All we need to do is to improve on what we have on ground. And so the 2023 election presents another opportunity for us as Nigerians to show that we can always pull through despite all challenges. And so I call on all Nigerians, patriots, to ensure that we participate in this process so that in the end, we are going to have that type of durable democracy that we'll be yearning for. I appeal to my brothers and sisters across the length and breadth of Nigeria to ensure security agencies, INEC, and all stakeholders, civil society. Yaga Africa has been doing a wonderful work, and I need to commend them. I've been following them. I'm so proud of what Samson Itodo and Cynthia has been doing, and all colleagues at Yaga Africa. I only appeal that you continue to sustain this team. We can't achieve such goals without civil society. And so we need to activate so much of what we are doing so that in the end, this democracy will become one of the best. Nigeria is a democracy that other African countries would want to learn from. We need to set the right example. Thank you.
So much, Professor. Cynthia?
Yeah, thank you. I will just borrow from my brother Mausi and Prof. and to say that I'm hopeful that despite or notwithstanding the challenges, that these elections would be conducted and would be reasonably accepted by the people. That's my first point of hope. The other part is just a call to the Electoral Commission and the respective institution to ensure that in their conduct that they are seen and believed to be non-partisan and professional. That goes a long way to inspire confidence. And then to Nigerians too, we've already heard it. This election means a lot, not just for us as a people, but to our brothers and sisters in the continent. And we must understand that there is no perfect system anywhere in the world. Every system has its challenges, and that democracy is not a product of wishful thinking. Democracy is an outcome of committed and hard work of a critical mass. And so meaning that this critical mass begins with every one of us coming out to vote on elections day. It's democracy is an outcome of hard work, is an outcome of commitment of that critical mass, and working together as a people, united as a people, we can achieve the kind of country or the country we dream of and the democracy we hope for. Thank you. I wish Nigeria successful elections.
Thank you so much. And again, I would like to thank our panelists. This has been a very, very interesting discussion, eye-opening. And I think it also gave us an understanding in terms of where we are with the preparation for the elections. And we are, us from Avionet and the team from Avionet, would like to wish Nigerians, first of all, and the team at Yaga, the best in their preparations as they go into the elections. And we are looking forward to more engagements of this nature, building into the lessons for the rest of Africa. We have, like Maus has indicated, several elections that are coming up in Sierra Leone, elections coming up in Liberia, as well as elections coming up in other parts of the world that could take a leaf from the Nigerian elections. We would also like to encourage our viewers to follow us at Avionet Twitter handle, and then also to follow us in our Facebook page, African Election Observers Network, for additional information and upcoming activities that we are going to be having going into this election and any other elections in the region. And let me also apologize, I think, for the sound at the start of the sessions. Hopefully, this also, it was a learning process for us, and I think we would like to assure you that we'll improve greatly as we go into the other discussions. Now, from us and the team at Avionet and our panelists would like to say thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you a pleasant day, and those that are voting in Nigeria, happy voting, and may the outcome be that which you desire. Thank you so much. Bye.